Hello everyone, I am Michael Ruger. I am the managing partner of Greenbush Financial Group. I'm doing this video today because the IRS may have just inadvertently created a new way for individuals to make big backdoor Roth IRA contributions to these accounts going forward. When Congress passed the Secure Act 2.0 at the end of 2023, a new feature that's going to become available effective 2024 is something called a 529 to Roth IRA transfer. Now, the idea was these 529 college savings accounts, I think the basic idea was if parents had money left over in these 529s for their kids, they had limited options with what to do with them, where they wanted to open up a third option, which is, hey, you can move this 529 balance directly over to a Roth IRA for your child and start helping them fund the retirement accounts. But again, what they might have inadvertently done is open up a new option that's going to allow high income earners to contribute money backdoor to a Roth IRA account by funding a 529 account for themselves. There are, of course, a lot of rules associated with who's going to be eligible to process these transfers from the 529s of the Roth IRAs. But I'm going to start off with what the law was probably intended for, which is an example of a parent has a balance left in one of these college 529 accounts, the child's done with college, and then you're going to be able to transfer that balance over to a Roth IRA for that child to help them jumpstart their retirement savings. So prior to Secure Act 2.0 passing, if you had balances left over in 529s, there were really only two options. You could change the beneficiary on the account to someone else, or you could take a non-qualified distribution of that account balance back to yourself. Now, both of those options created challenges for account owners. Now with a beneficiary change, let's say you only have one child, so there's no one to change the beneficiary to, or it's the youngest child account, so there's no one else to bump that account balance down to. So that created some challenges in itself. The second option, taking a non-qualified distribution, while you can always withdraw your contributions out of these 529 accounts tax and penalty free, the earnings portion of those accounts, if they're withdrawn and it's a non-qualified distribution, meaning not used for qualified educational expenses, it was subject to taxes and penalties. Enters now this third option starting in 2024 that account owners are going to be able to shift the money from their child's 529 account over to their Roth IRA up to specific lifetime limits. Now let's start going over all the rules, whether you're doing this for your kids or you're doing this for yourself as part of one of these advanced wealth accumulation strategies. There are a number of rules making you eligible to process these transfers. The first rule is the 15-year rule. These 529 accounts have to be in existence for at least 15 years before the account owner is eligible to begin making these 529 to Roth IRA transfers. They don't want you to just fund these 529s and immediately start transferring money over to a Roth IRA. So this will encourage people to start establishing those 529 accounts earlier, as soon as your child is born. Because if I fund this 529 as soon as my child is born, by the time they're 15, I've met that 15-year inception to date holding requirement. Starting when they're 16, 17, 18, I may be able to begin these 529 to Roth IRA transfers. As you will see throughout this video, there's a number of items that we're waiting on guidance from the IRS on. We need clarification. They issue all the rules and then they can come back a few months later and say, oh, whoa, that's not what we intended. This is what we meant. So we're still waiting on a number of that clarification. But one of the questions we have regarding this 15-year rule is people can process rollovers between different state 529 accounts. So I could essentially have a Virginia 529 account and then roll it over to a New York 529 account. And one of our questions is, by processing that rollover, does that essentially restart that 15-year inception to date clock that needs to be satisfied? We don't know yet. Rule number 2, contributions made to that 529 account within the previous 5 years are not eligible for these 529 to Roth IRA transfers. Those contributions have to have been in the account for 5+ years. So this could also incentivize account owners to pre-fund these sooner, which gives them more flexibility down the road after they hit that 15-year marker. Rule number 3, the beneficiary listed in that college savings 529 account has to be the same person as the Roth IRA that the balance is being transferred to. So you can't essentially have a 529 account, you're the owner, child's the beneficiary, and then you're sending it just to your own Roth IRA account. The beneficiary on the 529 and the owner of the Roth IRA have to be that same person. Now, the question that comes up, and this is a big item of clarification that we need, is the account owner can just change beneficiaries on their 529 accounts at any time. I can change it to another child. I can actually change it to myself. So the question becomes, if that account owner changes the beneficiary to someone else, does that essentially reset that 15-year inception to date clock that you have to satisfy, making you eligible for these transfers? We still don't know the answer to that yet. This is a very important guidance item that we're going to need for these advanced tax strategies, because I could essentially fund a 529 account when my child's first born. It lasts the 15 years. When my child turns 15, I could change the beneficiary on that account to myself, and if I don't have to resatisfy a 15-year holding period, then essentially I can set up a Roth IRA, change myself to the beneficiary, and then immediately start doing these transfers from that 529 to my Roth IRA as kind of this backdoor Roth contribution strategy. And that brings me to rule number 4, which is there are no income limitations on these 529 to Roth IRA transfers. So as many people know, with contributing to Roth IRAs, if you make over a certain amount, you're not eligible to contribute to a Roth IRA. So in 2023, the limitations for a single filer, once you get over $138,000, the Roth IRA contributions begin to phase out. And for married filers, the phase out begins at $218,000. This is valuable because regardless of how much my kids are making when I begin these transfers from the 529 to the Roth IRA, or if I'm able to do the switcheroo to me as the beneficiary, and if I make more than those income limits, then that's going to allow those transfers to happen even though I can't contribute directly to a Roth IRA. While this is an exception between the transfers from the 529 to the Roth versus actually making a contribution to a Roth IRA, a lot of the regular annual contribution limits still apply to these transfer amounts. This is important because the amount that you can transfer from a 529 to a Roth IRA for the beneficiary of that account is limited by the regular IRA annual contribution rules. So for 2023, even though I know these transfers aren't going to start beginning to be allowed until 2024, I have no idea what the limits are going to be in that year. So let's say this was allowed in 2023. So in 2023, the most you can contribute to a Roth IRA is the lesser of, if you're under 50, $6,500 or 100% of your earned income. Now, if we're talking about a child and they just work in the summers and make maybe $3,000 for the year, they're going to be subject to that lower $3,000 threshold. So if I want, let's say they have $20,000 sitting in this 529 account and I want to move that over to this Roth IRA as part of this transfer process, I'm going to be limited for that year of just a $3,000 transfer because I'm limited by their $3,000 in income. If they have no income for the year, then I actually can't even do a transfer in that tax year. The transfer amount will also be limited by any contributions that are made to any type of IRA by the child. So what I mean by this is that $6,500 is aggregate between contributions, between transfers. So if I have, let's say, a child that contributes $2,000 to their Roth IRA on their own, assuming they have, let's say, $10,000 in income for the year, the most I can transfer from that 529 to the Roth IRA is actually only $4,500 because it's the $6,500 less the $2,000 they already contributed themselves. So the $4,500 is all I can do during that year. For account owners that have larger balances in these 529 accounts that want to transfer these to the Roth IRAs, you can see that this may end up being a multi-year transfer process because you're going to bump into those annual limits. So let's say there's $30,000 sitting in that 529 account. It might take you multiple years of going through those annual limits to actually get that $35,000 over. And the next rule we're going to talk about is the $35,000 lifetime maximum. So you can do these annual transfers over, but the most you can do for any single beneficiary of these 529 accounts is $35,000 over their lifetime. Now I'm going to start to go over some of these advanced tax strategies that may be allowed to be employed both for your kids and yourselves that take advantage of these new 529 to Roth IRA transfer rules. So the first being is if you have a child or let's say you have a grandchild, you could essentially fund one of these college savings 529 accounts with actually no intention of ever using that account to pay for college. So my child is born, I fund this thing with, let's call it $15,000. I let that thing grow until they're 15, and then I start these Roth conversions. Let's say by then the $15,000 grew to $30,000 just from earnings. They accumulate tax deferred, and then slowly over the course of the next 5 to 10 years as they have earned income, I slowly move those balances over to their Roth IRA, and that was my intention all along. To show you how powerful this is in the numbers, if let's say I'm able to transfer $35,000 from a 529 over to a Roth IRA for, let's say, my daughter by the time she's 24, if that $35,000 then accumulates in a Roth IRA until she's 60, and through wise investment decisions, she gets her 8% rate of return per year, there is $620,000 potentially sitting in that Roth IRA when she turns 60 that can be withdrawn tax and penalty free. Now take that strategy and multiply it across each of your children and grandchildren, and it has the potential to create a tremendous amount of tax-free wealth for your family. Now let's look at the new 529 Backdoor Roth IRA strategy that may have inadvertently been created by the IRS with the passing of this new rule. So here's a fun fact about 529 accounts. Even though they're technically college savings accounts, there's no age restrictions on 1, who can be the owner, and 2, who can be the beneficiary. So if let's say I'm age 40, I can actually set up one of these 529 accounts today, fund the thing, make myself the beneficiary on the account, let this thing accumulate for 15 years, and when I'm 55, I can begin doing these 529 to Roth IRA transfers and slowly moving that money tax and penalty free over to a Roth IRA. I actually really don't care that the money's sitting in a 529 account for 15 years because, again, 529s accumulate tax-free. So it's almost as if I put in a Roth IRA from day one, it accumulates, I eventually move all the money over to my Roth IRA anyway, so by the time I'm 59 and a half, I can begin taking those distributions tax and penalty free from my Roth IRA. Oh, and remember, those income limitations that apply to Roth IRAs don't apply to these 529 versus Roth IRA transfers. So regardless of how much I'm making 15 years from now, I'll be able to execute those transfers as long as I have earned income. I mentioned that earned income limitation again because it could create an issue even if I'm trying to execute this backdoor Roth strategy down the road. Because if let's say I'm 65 and I want to execute this strategy, so I fund a 529 and I got to wait the 15 years. Well, if I'm age 80 and I'm no longer making any earned income, there is no way for me to move that balance from the 529 over to the Roth IRA. At that point, I would just have to be banking that I could change the beneficiary on the account to someone else and hopefully start funding their Roth IRA. But then it comes into that beneficiary change rule that we need guidance on from the IRS. The other question that arises are state clawback. So there are certain states like ours, New York, that offer state tax deductions for contributions to these 529 accounts when they're made. However, if certain non-qualified distributions happen, they could potentially claw back those deductions that were taken. This happened when the federal government changed the 529 rules to allow K through 12 expenses to be paid at a 529. The federal government said, you can do this, no Fed tax. But like New York State said, no, we don't recognize that as a qualified distribution. So if you do it, we're going to actually claw back the deduction you took for those contributions. It's very easy to see how this new 529 to Roth transfer strategy could be powerful, not just for kids that have money left over in college savings accounts, but also for individuals as a way to accumulate more tax-free income over their lifetime. But again, we just have to wait on some of this key guidance from the IRS that will most likely come out throughout the year. And as it does, we will release more videos giving you updates as to whether some of these advanced strategies will work or not work based on that guidance. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at moneysmartboard.com. Thank you.